How should I start this off? All right, let me see here. This is your host, Michael J. Long, host of Michaels Libertarian Pizza Party. And I got a special guest for you guys. You guys are not going to want to miss this interview. Please welcome our infinite famous Thomas Queter. He's running for the New York, and if I'm correct, you're running for the New York State Senate on District 52. Is that correct? That's absolutely correct. And so, why don't we start off with your with the website? I'm just gonna share the screen real quick so everyone can get an understanding of it. So Thomas Queter is running on behalf of the Libertarian Party. Is that correct?
That is correct. I am a Libertarian.
Right. He's running on behalf of the Libertarian Party, and so of course, as you know, there's no quit in Queter. And so I know, like, all your issues are on the website for tomfor52.com. Is that the correct website?
That is correct. Everything is out and open. The current policy there is what I ran on in 2020. Some things may or may not get changed or tweaked, but it's generally going to be my policy. I'm going to try to ramp up a bigger economic policy after the COVID-19 situation. Well, I think we all saw what it did to New York, right?
Oh yeah, New York State is just like falling apart by the wayside, and yet the governor wants to impose gun control and stuff on the
he declared another state of emergency over gun violence now, in which, I mean, we saw what he did with the powers from the last state of emergency over COVID. Once they rolled back those powers, they kind of cherry-picked and made some of those powers permanent. And it's going to further detriment small business in New York. And you know, gun shops are businesses too, and they're all small businesses.
Right, and this is seen as a target by many small businesses that are in that field.
Right, that's exactly what this is going to do. This is going to drive out the market, right? It's going to penalize the businesses that do this business. Most of them are smaller businesses, and just by way of penalty and liability, right? Because now the manufacturer and the sales or the point of sale of that gun are also liable if that gun is used in a crime. And to my knowledge, even if that gun is stolen and then used in a crime, that's a big dollar sign to just slap right on their backs.
Right.
I think it will lead to people leaving the state. I think it will lead to people leaving their business. I think it will lead to more businesses closing. We actually have more gunsmiths than people realize. Gunsmiths often run their business out of home. They may also be liable and therefore suppressed by this new legislation, or this new state of emergency and emergency powers. It's going to be interesting to see what they do.
Right. Yeah, because it says here, New York's assault on the right to defend oneself and loved ones, and on your site, has harmed many New Yorkers, especially people of color, and others who aren't confident in the ability of police to protect them. Tom will protect their rights and all that. So, my big thing with the whole gun control thing, as you know, is, okay, they got this law, and this was even before the SAFE Act got passed, and it seems like ever since the so-called Blue Wave Democratic Party gained the majority in the state legislature here in the state of New York, that gun control agenda has increased. Not that it hasn't under Republican leadership in the Assembly and State Senate, but now you're seeing more of that with the Democrats given full control to Governor Andrew Cuomo. And of course, this is not to not bash Republicans, because Republicans were involved in that process as well.
Right. So, if I can stop, Michael, for just a minute, it's important to remember that gun policy is what we know to be a wedge issue. Okay, it is designed and utilized by politicians and political parties to cause fear, no matter which side you're on. You're either afraid of losing your rights and being deemed a criminal overnight, or you're afraid of the big bad boogeyman that's looking to shoot you because everybody's out to get you, one way or the other. And the reality is neither. It's somewhere in between, right? When we talk about gun control, it's difficult because you're right. The left thinks that controlling guns works. But what they don't realize is that wherever there's more gun control, there is a bigger black market for illegal weapons and more violence, therefore. We see this in Chicago. We see this in other places where they ban guns around the country, that they just have more gun crime. The other notion is, what about police response? We have a lot of urban communities who the police don't bother to really police well, and so they don't call the police for help. Or if they do, they're stuck waiting. And in the meantime, their life is at risk. Myself, in an opposite situation, I'm in a rural area. Response times for police here is 30 minutes to 3 days. Believe it or not, our illustrious King Andrew Cuomo has not yet found a way to put necromancers, that is, those who bring people back from the dead, on the police force. When they show up to help you, they do not bring someone who can bring you back from the dead. And that is the point of having the right to bear arms and the right to self-protection, as well as the whole tyranny thing to overthrow government. But that's really not going to be a thing today. What is a thing is self-protection. If someone is trying to kill you, you should have the right to use whatever means works for you to defend your life. And in my opinion, your property as well. But
right, and carry on.
Another good illustration when you're talking to the left is something that I'm very familiar with. I can operate a weapon. I can operate a gun. You know what I can't do? Run away. Right? I'm also in a big wheelchair. I can't hide. I can't take a punch. Someone could kill me with one punch. I can't throw a punch. So, in that situation, with the police no less than 30 minutes away, how exactly am I supposed to be defended in a situation where my life is at risk to an aggressor? And the real point of the right to bear arms, in my opinion, is self-protection, and of course the right to overthrow a tyrannical government. I don't think we're anywhere near that being an issue today. I know it gets talked about a lot because, again, all of this controversy with it being a wedge issue. But the reality is, if we allow people to have their guns, and we allow people to train and do as they do to know how to operate them properly, and we make it so that gun ownership is not a taboo in our society, then it'll be out in the open. Everybody will know. Everybody will be comfortable. Everybody will be educated. When my parents went to school here, kids showed up to school in high school with their hunting rifles in their pickup trucks because they left school and they went hunting. They had rifle teams. Our local school actually just brought back a skeet team. That's pretty cool. So that there was an education in the community and to children. They knew how guns operated. And I think that's very important. I think when we lose our knowledge of a thing, we lose our perspective of the thing.
Well, I think that's the other. I mean, and that's a good. Those are all good points too. But I think I'm going to add to that because New York State is a Democratic state, and they got it set up where even before the SAFE Act, as I was going to insinuate here, is that if someone's trying to shoot you at your house, and you shoot and kill that person, but that person didn't break into your house, they charge you with murder. And that's screwed up, because really what you were doing was defending your life, and if you hadn't taken that shot, you would have been dead, and then they'd turn around and throw you in jail for protecting your loved ones, your property, your life, and that's the attitude among many democratic states. Is that,
I believe there was a gentleman in Oneida County.
Mm-hmm.
He, in the last couple of years, he defended his property against thieves with his late father's either rifle or shotgun, right? And he did shoot them. But because the rifle hadn't been transferred properly to his name, they held him for 10 months in jail. Even though he was just defending his property and potentially his life.
Right, which is almost a year in jail.
Yeah. I mean, it's just amazing that you could be jailed for protecting yourself and your property.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's the same way with, like, the drug policy that we have.
Yeah, so when we talk about making it illegal, right?
Mm-hmm.
People want to make guns illegal, or this illegal, or that illegal. Do you know how long cannabis was illegal?
In the state of New York, I'm reckoning since the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, quite a long time.
Longer than that.
Right. But what did the illegality of cannabis actually do? Did it get rid of cannabis?
No, it just created a black market for it, and that caused people to go into the black market to get the product, and then we had the whole ordeal with angel dust and stuff in the 60s because of that.
Yeah, it also created more prisoners, which are profitable, by the way. Prisoners are profitable. Never forget that.
Mm-hmm.
So when we make guns illegal, or anything illegal, we need to think about what happened with cannabis. We made this illegal. The significant number of people wanted it. That same significant number of people always had access to it. Nothing was actually changed, except maybe holding back the medicinal aspect of cannabis. So why would we want to do the same thing to guns? Or tobacco vapes? Why would we want to do that?
And now they got these warning signs on the tobacco products. You walk into any store and it says, warning, this drug could be very addictive, you know? And you know, they sit there and say, look, the drugs kill people, so therefore we have to outlaw it. But they don't bother to outlaw pharmaceutical drugs because they know that just won't work, number one.
So I'm okay with warnings and advice. Like, I'm not okay with force. I'm not okay with prohibition. I'm not okay with the government making strict decisions on our behalf.
But it's like you talk with the left about it, and you talk with the conservatives, and they're all kumbaya with regards to the drug prohibition, which Nixon started with most of the drugs. But it, and you know, at least from my knowledge, anyways, or from the research I garnered, there was attempts to prohibit it in the 1800s. But you know, Nixon really started the second drug war, if you will, that we're still currently in. And his statement was he wanted to do that to go after quote unquote minorities, who he described as spicks and blacks, basically. But what he was inferring to was Puerto Ricans, Hispanics, and blacks. So that was his intention behind the drug war, was that it was going to pulverize their communities, and it has. And now that it's affecting those so-called white communities, it's now suddenly a public health emergency.
Well, and the reality is that the war on drugs was also just a war on the poor. It wasn't just it did definitely disparatively affect the black and otherly cultured communities, but basically it affected poor people.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I prefer advice and legitimate protection over what we've seen. You know, when the COVID thing first happened, one of the first things they did was roll out a page on the New York State website where you could turn in your neighbor, turn in your loved one, turn in the guy down the road for not wearing a mask or not social distancing, and it was $1,000 fine, right? I mean, at the same time, in Mexico, if you were seen by the police not wearing a mask or not social distancing, they stopped, they gave you an informational, they talked to you, and they handed you a mask if you needed one. No $1,000 fine. No courts getting clogged up.
Right.
No bureaucracy. No harm to the people, because it's a pandemic, and in a pandemic situation, you should probably help people instead of harm them. I mean, I don't know about you, Michael, but I don't go to the hospital and stroll down the ICU punching people, right? Probably a bad idea. Not a good thing to do. But what our government did was, looked at this situation and said, this is a bad situation. We should make it worse. And they started punching us.
Well, they did with so many different high regulations that they're intending to do with the cannabis market, as far as I'm aware. Because, they're board of whatever for the cannabis, their COB whatever.
Right.
They're going to try to over-regulate it and overtax it.
I've actually talked to a group of cannabis entrepreneurs, people involved with bigger companies who are kind of like chain companies for medical cannabis and recreational cannabis, and they were watching closely because they knew what was going to happen, and they were feeling out their market for moving into New York State and creating more business. But what ended up happening was, and I'm going to quote, I don't remember the name, the New York State tax structure of cannabis is the most convoluted cannabis taxation structure I have ever seen. I will not do business in New York. This is what this gentleman said. Then, of course, they're trying to delineate how to give you tickets if you're driving, right?
Right.
How are they?
And I think the other one.
Right. We already know that physical impairment tests don't work.
Right.
People fail those sober. We already know that it's going to be extremely expensive and difficult to test whether or not you're under the influence of cannabis, as opposed to whether or not you still have cannabis in your system. Because the influence of say, inhaling cannabis wears off after a few hours, but the cannabinoids are in your body for a couple of weeks. Mm-hmm. So how are they going to expect our court and police systems to delineate through that? That's going to be very interesting to watch and see how biased it is in one direction or another.
Right.
I mean, if this comes out in a way that they're actually seeking to issue tickets and seeking to collect revenue as opposed to seeking to do any kind of good for the population, that should be self-evident in the numbers we see and what comes out of this.
Mm-hmm. Because, because it affects everybody, the decisions that are being made by the state, and I prefer a system like you do where the government gets out of the way as much as possible.
Right. And to that note, I'm all for any private business testing its employees. Right. If that's your choice, you're a business, you pay for that, or you require your employees to pay for it, whatever. As long as it's not a government force. If you're a contractor and you're working construction and you don't want your guys to be high on cannabis, I understand that. You should have them tested. But do not rely on the state, do not rely on the taxpayers, and do not make it any kind of government force.
Right, because the taxpayers should not be responsible for for decisions private companies make.
Right.
And a lot of people don't realize this, especially people on the left, but unions, quote unquote, unions are part of the free market. But when they talk about unions, they want government in the mix. They want government to force unionization in with every business. And, with the right, you're seeing, right to work and this and that. And so the conservatives pride themselves as being anti-unions, while the left make themselves seem like they're pro-union. But we want government involved with this, that, and the other thing. And You know, it's so flawed, a lot of the logic, if not, you know, especially with regards to economic matters.
So New York's an interesting beast in that regard.
Mm-hmm.
New York has a lot of state-forced unions. Like if you're a police officer, you have to be in a union. And you know who gets endorsed by police unions? Republicans.
Right.
You know who gets endorsed by certain large business unions? Republicans.
Right.
You know, I'm all for the free assembly of people to negotiate on behalf as a group. That is a union. Okay? That's what a union is. What we have today is not a union.
Right.
What we have today
is government control over
and a system of coercion.
Right.
And a system of coercion.
Right. We don't have unions like from what the unions in terms of what they were originally intended for. Most of what we call unions today are basically a bunch of people that run to the government and say, we need a law that says this, this, and this. Or we need a law that says this, this, and that, or this, that, and the other thing.
Right, and that's how it works now. And it's all about money and support and, you know, what they can give each other and how to take advantage of the people. And that's wrong.
Right.
Unfortunately, our unions are almost acting as, I didn't even know how to put it, but they're often taking dues from people who don't want to pay them. I mean, if you work for the state, you have to be in a union. If you work for a lot of municipal functions, you have to be in a union. You don't have a choice. You're forced to pay those dues. And if you don't file the extraneous paperwork to not have your funds go to political activities, then your funds go to political activities. They're almost structured and as dirty as a lot of our political systems now.
Especially with state workers.
Yes. I mean, I can't think of a state worker that I know of. I know a lot of them who are happy with their unions.
Right. And then they got OPWDD, so I can't imagine what those people are going through, because it's almost like they're de-incentivized to do their jobs correctly because they got to be in some kind of union. That's absurdity at its max.
Yeah, and you know, government structures like that are almost intended not to function properly.
Right. And I think that's what they want, and they'd love more than anything else to extend that to the private sector.
No, absolutely.
You know, because that's already happening with Albany Med down in Albany. Is they have all these nurses get together. Oh, we want to be part of a quote-unquote government-run union, basically, but they call it a union. They don't call it like what it really is. And you know,
New York has one key problem, one very key problem that keeps getting ignored and ignored and ignored. The combination of taxation and cost of living is always on the rise to a severe degree, and they're always finding new ways and reasons for which to tax us. And we see this largely in unfunded mandates for their property taxes, but income taxes have gone up. In January of 2020, the tax on a rental vehicle went from 8 to 20% in one fell swoop. You know, bed taxes are high, road taxes are high, business taxes are high, permit fees are high. You know, all of these things are high. You know what hasn't increased?
The taxes increased?
What hasn't increased other than taxes?
What?
Our population. Population has gone down, right? Population keeps going down because people keep leaving, and they keep taxing more and more. And sooner or later, that's gonna snap. That's gonna break, and the feds won't be able to bail us out. I've heard things as soon as 2023, the feds will no longer be able to bail out our state. And when you take it into account, the fact that New York State passed a budget this year that's bigger than all but 20 nations on this earth. There are something like 190 nations on earth, and New York State alone has a budget bigger than all but 20 of them.
Yeah, and that's absurd, you know, that's going on. But, you know, A lot of the
That should be terrifying.
I'm terrified of it too, you know. Let me put it to you like this. You know, the taxes affect everybody, including those that are in group homes and supportive apartments, like, you know, people like who, generally people like me in general are in supportive apartments or group.
Yeah, hot housing.
Right. And then there's so much of it that gets taken out on taxes and so much of it that gets taken out. This is just for rent alone. That there's a portion of it that goes out for rent and supports for the staff, and then there's this portion that gets taken out for
and you know
the landlord, and it's only like $600 of however much they charge you.
So the administrative overhead and regulatory requirements just to operate these programs that decide to give out this help in the first place tends to be exceptionally wasteful. Exceptionally wasteful. They spend way too much money to decide whether or not to help someone. And that's before everything that you were just talking about.
Right. Because they have, like, these apartments under Lexington alone. And there's so many different agencies that supposedly take care of people with disabilities. And now you're seeing an overlap between that and mental health, at least with Lexington anyways. You have the OPWDD side, which they call the OMR side, which, if you look at that term, there's a reason why they supposedly removed that name from their state office's database to OPWDD, which stands for the Office of Persons with Disabilities, yet they still have OMR for the section for the homes, and then OMH.
Yeah, so the OPDDW is actually for developmental disabilities specifically.
Right.
They try to separate us into groups. It's you know, that's another thing. Our government does a lot to categorize us, disabled or not, separate us, put us against each other, make us think we're a thing in a group in a corner. And it's not true.
Right.
It's really not true. But what they're trying to do is to create differences that make us feel spite or jealousy or disdain for each other. And as a disabilities advocate, I have literally witnessed the deaf and the blind fighting each other over which one gets more welfare and why. And that's the kind of argument that this system creates. That's ridiculous. We shouldn't be having that. You're going to help somebody. You know, I watched a presentation by Cato the other day.
Mm-hmm.
An author by the name of John C. Goodman, not the author. He wrote, I believe the book is titled A New Way to Care or New Ways to Care. And he spoke about a lot of things. And I asked him specifically, you know, what about disability benefits? And he addressed it as to if you gain a disability, say at work, you get injured, right? And he compared it to, I believe it was Chile, where that is built into the private insurance system. The business you work for has insurance, and there's a payout scale for that. And the only government involvement with that procedure is to oversee the hearing. You have a hearing between you and the people on your side, like your doctor, and the insurance company, and they determine that you're legitimately disabled, to what degree, and you get a disability check. It doesn't come from the government. It doesn't come from taxpayers. It's not subsidized. And it's been a free market. You know what else it doesn't come with? It doesn't come with restrictions on your rights. So let's say you're a carpenter, and your injury is you lost your leg at the knee. You can no longer be a carpenter, right? But you also have skills as a seamstress. You can go out the next day, start working as a seamstress, still get that check. No restrictions. You can better yourself no matter what.
Yeah, it sounds like something that we ought to have in this country. And I know they did something similar to that in Scandinavia, although the left tries to call it a socialist paradise, when really what it is it's something like what you described for Chile, right? And they have this like in Denmark and some of the Scandinavian countries, probably all the Scandinavian countries, whereby they have a government-run welfare system for those that are disabled, but it's not even funded by the taxpayers. It's funded via private contributions, private charities funded.
Oh, do you mean to say that they're crowdfunding welfare?
Yeah, at least in Scandinavia. And I found out about that through like John Stossel and all, you know, when he.
So you probably know that my wheelchair is crowdfunded, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, that's an interesting, you know, it usually took about 2 years for me to get a wheelchair through New York State systems, even with really good insurance.
Mm-hmm.
The cost would be, you know, extravagant for the system. And, you know, I had reapplied for the same exact model, make, size, everything in the wheelchair that I'd had 5 times prior. And I was denied due to the changes in healthcare recently. And I was told that I could only choose between a certain range of wheelchairs that would detriment my health. Right? They were not adequate for seating. They were not adequate for suspension. I have what's known as Bone's disease. And it was libertarians who crowdfunded the exact wheelchair I needed. They crowdfunded it, had it created, had it shipped here from Texas, and had it modified to be perfect for my needs in 2 months.
And that's
2 months,
an example of how efficient the free market is versus the government.
Not only that, Michael, but they did it at a third the cost of one of those chairs that the state had offered.
Yeah, that's amazing because, you know, the state, right? Even with glasses, they charge Medicaid and make you choose from a narrow selection of glasses, and almost all of them, right, break easily, you know, they don't even last over a year, if that.
I actually have a distant cousin that goes through that situation exactly. He lives up the road. He's my uncle's wife's sister's son.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, it was just the other day he was complaining about exactly what you said about glasses. It also took forever for his glasses to come in the first place. But, you know, we need more free market solutions. And to that, no, I'll be taking a very close look at what I hear is going on in Montana, where they're starting to open up some free market healthcare solutions in the state of Montana. If Montana can do it, why the hell can't New York?
Because New York State is run by the goody two-shoe administration of King Andrew II.
But, you know, sometimes you have to convince people.
Yeah.
You know, I could be a very convincing person, and I've had many discussions with people from all political perspectives. I've made people from all political perspectives become libertarians by talking to them.
Right.
It's quite easy to get people to agree with you on at least some things, because, you know, most of us, we all really want the same things. What we disagree with is about how to do it, how to get from point A to point B. Everybody wants to be happy and healthy and warm and fed, right?
Right. But it's a matter of explaining to people that disagree with our approach how their approach may not help them in their given circumstances or situations.
And one of the approaches to that is to offer policies that are not a flip of anything, right? You're not changing anything. You're not taking anything away. You're offering an option that costs the same or less, right? So, I don't know, let's say you're in this, and this welfare program, and that costs $10,000, right? You technically qualify on paper for those programs, and the state knows that averages to a $10,000 cost, just for easy example, right? But from your situation, you can look at this, and this, and you can look at $10,000, and you can say, well, I can do this, and this for $6,000, and have $4,000 to take care of this, which I also really need. And that gives you the opportunity, the option to do more with less. It wouldn't be quite as cut and dry as handing over a $10,000 check, but that's something we can do.
And then other states where they have, for some of the private primary care physicians, well, they'll offer a subscription rate, right, for basic medical checkups. And the way the way that insurance used to work was they only covered you for catastrophic losses. So you had to pay out the rest on your own, and not everybody got like private insurance because that was more or less managed by private charities, so it went to people who truly needed it the most.
And you know, there's another thing to always consider, right? Decentralization of all things. When it comes to, I don't care if it's healthcare, education, or the roads, a centralized perspective is going to get it wrong a significant amount of the time in those locations or situations that it's less familiar with or less concerned with. Whereas a decentralized system has many points concerned with many smaller areas, and they're going to do the best for each of those areas. I think we need more of that in healthcare. I think we need more of that in the roads, although the roads are fairly decentralized except for their highways. But we need to allow for the opportunity of individuals, communities to address their own needs. Mm-hmm. Because they're going to address them better, and they're going to spend that money more wisely, and they're going to spend it more efficiently.
And plus, we won't be as dependent as we are now on the...
And as it is now, people like myself, right, the assistance that I get from the state really doesn't cover an awful lot that I actually really need. And so my community all my life has been picking that up anyhow, right? But as they make things even harder for people to survive, it's even harder for their community to have that little bit of extra to help me out or others like me out. The more the state takes control, the less control we have. And the less control we have, the less ability we have to help each other.
Right.
We really need to leave our resources in the communities where they'll be utilized more efficiently and to a better end for the right reasons. You have to believe people are good.
And I believe people are good. I do. Whether that be the CEOs or investors or someone as like you and me. Just, I think people in general are good. You know? And I think one of the other things that Reason did is they made quite a few of these videos outlining how dirt poor, the definition of dirt poor has changed over the years with technology. Dirt poor used to mean that you were out on the streets with absolutely nothing. And now when you're out on the streets, you at least have a cell phone with you. Right. And there are at least private charities who can pay that phone bill. And you have all these phone...
To be fair, there were a lot of private charities in the past too.
Right.
Government regulation shut a lot of them down. The systematic growth of our welfare system has hindered their ability to exist. So we were talking about resources in the community, right? Mm-hmm. If the government takes 30% out of the pockets of each working individual in a community, that is 30% that those individuals don't have put towards their own communities, their own initiatives, their neighbors who need help, their community events, their fundraisers for those who need, their food pantries, right? And we know, right, this is on paper, this is not a secret. We know that the 30% that the state takes is, these are not using real numbers here, but let's call it 30%. We know that a significant portion of that 30% is wasted in the bureaucracy, which has many layers, many levels, is not direct, is extremely wasteful, and it's a forced bad investment. I mean, if I told you that you could buy a hamburger for $5 and buy the same hamburger for $2, which hamburger would you choose?
Probably the $2 one because it's cheap.
Right, especially if it's the same exact hamburger from the same place cooked by the same person. But you know that $5 one is government hamburger. That's the one they're selling.
Right.
Although chances are, in my example, the $2 burger would be made by people who know who you are in your community, people who care, perhaps people who grew the lettuce and tomato and onions themselves. And there's a good chance that because it was local and community oriented, that $2 burger tastes 10 times better than the $5 government burger.
Right.
And I'm always telling people, the government is a lot like a fast food burger commercial. You know, you see it on TV, it looks delicious, the tomato looks red, the lettuce looks yellow, the onion, the lettuce looks yellow, the lettuce looks green, the onion looks white, the cheese is dripping, you know, the burger is thick and juicy, that bun is fluffy, and every sesame seed is just aligned perfectly. And it looks like the best burger you've ever seen in your life. And then you come out the other side of that drive-thru and you've got a flat, greasy patty, vegetables with no color, there's very little flavor, and the nutrition is not there.
Right.
So that's why I say government is like a fast food burger commercial.
Yeah, I think that's a good analogy. Because they have the money, even in some of these corporate burger joints, where they will dress the food up and, you know, and make it look so good and appealing to the human mind, but what they sell you is completely different, and that's government to a T with a lot of things, you know.
Right. They sell you the pretty picture, and they deliver you a greasy mess.
Exactly. And that's how they present gun control. Oh, we won't have any more crime. Everything will be down. There'll be no more gun violence. And then what they don't tell you is that if such violence were to occur, your right to self-defense goes away. Why? Because they outlawed it.
I think Chicago's a great example. That they've, for a long time, had some of the most strict gun regulations in that city. And they, for the long time, had the most gun violence.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you noticed my shirt, Michael.
I run better than the government.
Yeah, and it's true. It's true, because I can take at least one step and then a dive, which is at least one step better than the government.
Right.
Because all I do is take that dive. Interestingly enough, we will be coming out with my own promotional shirts, and watch for those in the next few weeks. I'm hoping to have them advertised in Muddy Waters Media.
Well, that's awesome. So, what's the name of that website again? So that viewers, so that our viewers...
if you want to see more about my policy, if you want to see more about who I am, you can go to tomfor52.com. It's TOMFOR52.com. You'll also find links to my social media, so you can see what I've been up to. You'll find a lot of information about my policy. I had a lot of policy on for 2020. I'm going to have a lot of policy on for 2022. And I think what you really get out of it is that I am pretty straightforward and pretty honest, and I'm not pulling my punches.
Right.
You got to put some of this waste in these systems without harming people, and we can do it. We can really do this. And you know, the Libertarian vice president candidate is always telling people, you are the power. Well, I would add to that, you are the solution.
Mm-hmm. So, and of course, how can people help you? Of course, like I know there's a donation tab. Can people donate?
Yeah. There's a link in the upper right of the website. You can of course donate. And if you're in my district, or if you're a resident of New York and you want to help petition next year, I need petitioners. The Libertarian Party lost ballot access due to funny lawmaking, and now instead of just a portion of the Libertarian signatures, I need a portion of the entire district's signatures, which bumps it up to about 3,000 minimum required and a goal of 4,500 signatures. So I need all
includes Democrats and Republicans.
Yes, anybody who's a registered voter can sign the petition.
That's interesting.
So, you know, I need boots on the ground. If you're mobile and you want to come out to District 52 in the petitioning period next year, it's the independent petitioning period right now, unless we win our lawsuit that is ongoing. As I said, there were some funding laws made, and the party is fighting those funny laws. You know how New York likes its funny laws.
I know,
Really...
it's almost like the Ronald McDonald coming in with the hamburger. I'm gonna take your food, but I'm not gonna tell you I'm gonna take your food. I'm just gonna dress up like this, in this yellow suit or this prison uniform, and I'm gonna act all funny, you know, yeah. And then they backstab you, in other words.
So, yeah, you know, donations, money talks in politics, unfortunately. I'm learning that. I would really appreciate your donations at downfor52.com. But if you're willing to volunteer to help with petitioning next year, if you're willing to put in a day or a week or a weekend or a couple of days here and there, I need all the help for petitioning I can get here in District 52. That's Broome County, Tioga County, Apashananga County, and part of Delaware County.
All right. Sounds like a plan.
I really appreciate you having me here, Michael.
It was my pleasure.
Do you have any more questions?
Well, is there anything, any closing statements you'd like to add before we
You know, yeah. You know, I said a minute ago, you know, Spike Cohen, he says you are the power, and I'd like to follow that up with you are the solution. And what that means is, if you've got an hour of time that you don't know what to do with, you can help somebody. You can help your neighbor. You can find a cause. If you've got a lot of time, you can certainly find a bunch of community efforts to support, to assist with. You can reach out to individuals and help. We need to bring back this sense of self-sufficiency in so fact as communities and individuals, right? Individuals should feel empowered to be self-sufficient as much as they can, but there are going to be limits, and when those limits are met, right, that's when the community comes in, and the community can be self-sufficient because then two people within a community can do things for each other when it's necessary, voluntarily, at a lower cost than when the government does it. So, you know, help someone today, live with yourself tomorrow, and have lower taxes later.
Sounds like a plan. Sounds kind of awesome if you ask me, but yeah, I'll take that.
Voluntarism is an awesome plan in all things.
Mm-hmm. All right there, Thomas. Well, again, it was a pleasure having you on, and I truly appreciate you coming on tonight.
Oh, no problem, Michael. It's good to be here.
Well, thank you.